So, here's the situation. A federal agent shoots and kills a woman in her car. Almost immediately, protests erupt. The federal government calls it terrorism. The city's mayor says that's a flat-out lie. Today, we're breaking down the fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis, an incident that happened in a city that was already pushed right to the edge. To really get what happened, you have to understand the tension that was already just hanging thick in the air. The night before the shooting, the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, gave this pretty stark warning. And he wasn't talking about crime. He was talking about the federal agents themselves. He saw them as a force meant not to keep order, but to create chaos. Right, so this shooting didn't just happen in a vacuum. This was Minneapolis, only weeks after the city was completely shaken by protests and riots following the murder of George Floyd. The whole community was wounded, and any trust in law enforcement was already fractured, to say the least. And the geography here is so important. This fatal encounter happened just 4 blocks from Cup Foods, the exact intersection where George Floyd lost his life. For people in that community, this wasn't just another incident. It was a traumatic event happening on what many felt was sacred ground. So what was fueling all this tension? Well, it really comes down to one number: 2,000. That's how many federal agents had been sent to Minneapolis. In fact, ICE itself called it its largest deployment ever. Local officials, from the mayor to the police chief, were openly warning that this huge federal presence could end in tragedy. Okay, so with that context, let's turn to the incident itself. What exactly happened on that street? We can piece together a pretty factual baseline from the video footage that's out there. The woman at the center of all this was 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good. It's really important that we say her name as we break down the final moments of her life. And it all just unfolds with breathtaking speed. Video shows these agents walking up to Good's stopped SUV. They tell her to get out. Her car then moves back just a little, then inches forward. At that moment, the vehicle makes contact with, it bumps, an ICE agent. And immediately, that agent pulls his weapon and fires 3 times into the car. The whole thing is over in just a matter of seconds. And this is where things get really complicated. This is where the facts of what happened collide with 2 completely different realities. In the aftermath, the federal government and Minneapolis city leaders gave accounts of the same event that just could not both be true. I mean, just look at the language here. Federal officials claimed Good weaponized her vehicle in an attempt to kill an officer. They called it an act of domestic terrorism. But local leaders, watching the very same video, described it as the car simply bumping the agent. They accused the administration of trying to spin a tragic and avoidable death into a political talking point. And this federal narrative, it came straight from the top. President Trump posted online using these exact words, saying that Renee Good had violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer. This painted a picture of a deliberate, malicious attack. But Mayor Jacob Frey's response was immediate, and let's just say, it was blunt. After seeing the footage for himself, he went on TV and said this about the federal government's claim. Having seen the video, that is bleep. A complete and total rejection of their whole story. And the disconnect went even further. President Trump claimed it was hard to believe the agent is alive and said he was recovering in the hospital. But what did the video show? Moments after the shooting, you can see the agent walking away, seemingly fine, just adjusting his mask. It was later confirmed he was simply checked out at a hospital and discharged. So, as these 2 conflicting stories were swirling, the community's response on the ground was raw and immediate. People took to the streets, not with confusion, but with grief and with anger. That evening, a candlelight vigil formed right at the scene. And the focus of the crowd was crystal clear. They just chanted over and over again, "Say her name, Renee Nicole Good," determined that the person at the heart of all this would not be forgotten. Reporters who were there described this really powerful and somber atmosphere. Flowers were laid around the blood still on the pavement. You could see broken pieces of a taillight scattered among the candles. And in a real sign of those deep-seated tensions, a lot of the crowd's anger was actually directed at Minneapolis police, even though they weren't the ones involved in the shooting. This incident didn't just spark protests, it sparked this urgent call for answers and accountability. How could this happen? And more importantly, could it have been prevented? The Minneapolis police chief, Ryan O'Hara, really pushed back against all the political spin, insisting on a methodical, evidence-based process. He argued that everyone involved, especially Renee Good's family, deserved a truly impartial investigation to find out what really happened. And this is where the police chief brought up something absolutely critical about police training. He explained that modern law enforcement really emphasizes de-escalation, especially with unarmed drivers. Instead of forcing a confrontation, he said the standard procedure would be to simply get the license plate and follow up later, a choice that could have avoided the potential for violence entirely. And all of that leaves us with this final lingering question. When an incident is seen through two completely different lenses, one of domestic terrorism, the other of a preventable tragedy, what does justice even look like? For a city like Minneapolis, still healing from such deep wounds, trying to find that answer is more critical than ever.